Marriage is being redefined. We'll talk about the lawless way it's being brought about and the impact on your religious freedom. This is the CitizenLink Report. Hi, I'm Stuart Shepard. Marriage is no longer just between a man and a woman in the entire state of Florida. But here's something you may not have heard. It's happening in spite of the fact that no federal or state court has issued a ruling that legally has the power to make that happen. John Stemberger leads the Florida Family Policy Council, a state organization associated with CitizenLink. He also led the effort to pass a constitutional marriage amendment in the Sunshine State that was designed to keep this from happening. I talked to him while he was in Tallahassee by webcam.
The federal judge in this case here in Florida ruled that only two homosexual individuals who are the plaintiffs in this case in Washington County, which is North Florida County, can be married. Unfortunately, he also offered his opinions outside the legal jurisdiction of his ability to rule outside the Northern District of Florida and encouraged clerks of the court to really disobey the law. It's remarkable, but that's what he did. He said, if you may follow this, you don't have to follow it, but if you don't follow it, he said, you're probably going to be sued. So he made an argument for clerks of the court to really ignore current Florida law and the fact that they should be bound by our current law, which defines marriage between a man and a woman.
Now, this is a topic that you're pretty invested in, John. You ran the campaign to pass a state marriage amendment in Florida, which you successfully passed. A lot of people might be wondering, why is that not keeping this from happening?
Yeah, and that's the real injustice, Stuart. And you think about the just under 5 million voters that in an act of direct democracy say, we think this issue is so important, we're going to codify it and put it into our state constitution. Essentially, a handful of lawyers who are judges in black robes are saying, you know what, we're going to find this newfound right to marry that's not enumerated in the federal constitution, it's not enumerated in the state constitution. In fact, it's to the contrary, enumerated to the opposite in the state constitution. And so they're kind of making it up as you go along, as Barack Obama would say, just making stuff up and putting it in the constitution. That's what we have. We have a kind of widespread lawlessness where the rule of law means nothing nowadays, and judges, clerks, county officials, from the president, from the White House, the courthouse, they're just ignoring and disrespecting the rule of law. I think it undermines the legitimacy of government, and specifically the legitimacy of courts in this particular case.
John, this came out of the courts, and you're taking it back to the courts. You've actually filed a suit to try to influence the outcome of this. Tell us about that lawsuit.
Well, a week ago, we filed suit against the Osceola County Clerk of the Court and against Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, both who said they're going to officiate over same-sex marriages, on the Tuesday that this all unravels. And so in direct defiance of the law at the time they announced it. Now, of course, they now have this federal court case which they can rely upon, which is still not legitimate. But we filed and asked the court to basically enforce the law. Unfortunately, both the state attorney said he would not enforce the law. We see, again, at a widespread level, people just ignoring what the law is. And so one of those cases have been knocked out of court. The other case has been set for a hearing on Wednesday, the day after this goes down, even though we asked for an emergency hearing immediately. So no due process there. And it's just very difficult fighting an institution where they're not following the rules and they're not being fair, not using due process, and not using the procedure that's normally in place in a legal action.
I do want to explain to our viewers, we're having this conversation at a point in time. This is developing even as we're talking about it here by video. One stop along the way for you may be the Supreme Court. How would that play out?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this battle legally is not over until the United States Supreme Court rules. It appears that we do have a 5-member majority for states' rights if they come down with a decision. They may choose again to punt and not actually decide. But it appears that Justice Kennedy, who is the swing vote, both in the Windsor case, the last very significant same-sex marriage case, and in subsequent cases involving other issues, he's arguing for states' rights. So it appears that there is a 5-vote majority for states' rights. Now, if they did rule that, this would immediately, Stuart, reinvigorate the authority of Florida's marriage amendment and every other marriage amendment around the country that has been supposedly struck down by these newfound rights. And it would create a confused class of citizens where you have people that are legitimately married, same-sex couples that are now married, but their marriages are under question under the under the reauthorization of these marriage amendments, and then a third class of same-sex couples who want to be married but now can't be married because the marriage amendments have been reinvigorated. So it just produces chaos, which I think sometimes our opponents would rather see rather than have clarity and order in the way these things unfold.
John, another aspect of this that we're seeing is this is becoming, it already is, a religious freedom question. What's your advice for churches and for Christian-owned businesses? What should they be doing as the landscape around us is changing?
Goodness, I do a 6-hour seminar on this very question, Stuart, but that is the final frontier. Religious liberty for churches primarily, for Christian schools, and for businesses, small, closely held businesses that are people faith-based. This is the final frontier because, as we'll see in Florida and as other states, it's not about marriage. It's about silencing anyone who has a different view on human sexuality. And so there's a lot that needs to be done. They need to really the Alliance Defending Freedom has just put out a wonderful new document addressing concerns for these three institutions. But this is the final frontier, and it is, if we cannot, as Christians and even as Jews, and frankly, I mean, every major world religion, if you look at the books that they come from, they all believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. The Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Old Testament, the New Testament, it's very clear. And so they're kind of running up against the ultimate tradition, and those things can't be changed. So I think faith is the final frontier. This is the thing we have to be able to express our faith in an orthodox way without the hostility of the state or the hostility of these activists coming after us and trying to shut us down.
Now, from your comments, I think we can surmise you are in this for the long haul.
That's right. I mean, you know, irrespective of what the law does, we kind of view ourselves, Stuart, in the same way that pro-lifers did during the Roe versus Wade battle in 1973. They were saying much the same thing. You're on the wrong side of history. The pro-life movement's dead. Look, it took us 40 years, but in spite of the law, we've developed a culture of life. We're winning in that battle in so many ways, with young people, with the polling, with movies. I mean, you could go on and on with legislation. So I think that not only here in Florida, but throughout the pro-marriage movement, the pro-family movement throughout the country, we are looking to rebuild a culture of marriage, one mind at a time, one life at a time, to help people see you can't do civilization without natural marriage. It's just not going to work. And so this is a critical issue that just produces social order at a very basic level. You can't have a civilized society without marriage and family structures. And we see in the inner city what happens when those structures break down.
Very well said. John, you also happen to head up an organization that's part of a state network of 38 associated family policy councils. I want to give you a chance before we leave to talk about what you do with that organization. Give people a thumbnail of what it is you're up to.
Well, it's my great privilege to be associated with the family policy councils around the country, and at CitizenLink.org they can find out more information about their state policy council. But there's 38 of us, I believe, around the country, and we are state-based pro-life, pro-family groups. Most of us are the kind of the leading voices on marriage and family in our respective states. It's hard work, it's satisfying, but the primary thing is God called us to this work, and so we do it unapologetically, and we do it hopefully with grace and truth.
We're very proud of the work done by our Association of State Groups. If you'd like to see whether there's one in your state, just go to CitizenLink.com and click on the orange map of the United States. And remember, stand tall and be heard.